All right, I've had all of my credit and debit cards replaced over the past year or so with ones that include that little chip on the front. I'd show you, except I'm not going to do that for obvious reasons. I hope for a world where things got easier, but that's just not the case at all. Joining us to talk a bit about the chip card transition is Ian Carr from Quartz. How's it going, Ian?
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. I was out the last time you were on, so it's good to see you. First, how is chip card supposed to make transactions more secure and hopefully a little bit easier? What's its promise?
It's almost like two-factor authentication, except with your credit card. The magstripe card, which most of us are very familiar with, essentially it's pretty dumb. You just swipe it and it spits out your credit card number. With the chip card, it's supposed to serve as like another authentication layer. So there are two different ways. One is you can authenticate with the signature, which is where you sign the receipt, which is what most of us do in the States. Another way is when you add you type in a 4-digit PIN code. So if you have a debit card, that's you're pretty familiar with that then. But yeah, so in the U.S., we've primarily been using chip and sig, which is a signature authentication, which is just one of the many problems with the U.S. rollout for the chip card.
So then how is this different than other places where this actually works pretty well? I mean, if I had to summarize my experience with chip over the past year, it's been an experience filled with like doubt that it's going to work, uncertainty on what to use, the things there, but and it obviously takes a chip card, but then I'm told, no, just swipe it anyways. Like, why is it failing here and it's working elsewhere?
There are a lot of different reasons why. I think the main reason is that there wasn't a strong incentive in the U.S. In the UK and other countries that have rolled out the chip card, I mean, even 10 years ago, the UK shifted about a decade ago. That only happened because of a government mandate, and that's because the government said, hey, we need to improve our security, we need to improve our payment infrastructure. So they told merchants and banks to unilaterally adopt chip and PIN. It's very different than what happened in the U.S. In the U.S., everyone just agreed on there was no mandate at all. It was something called a liability shift that went into effect October 1st, 2015. What that was basically banks right now cover you for all fraud that happens on your card. What the bank said was that if a merchant doesn't have the necessary equipment up and running for chip cards, then the fraud liability is on them. So let's say the Target hack happened post liability shift, Target would be on the hook for all of that money that customers lost. Wow. And for retailers, that could, for big retailers like Target and Best Buy and Home Depot, that could really add up. And so that's why a lot of the big retailers, Walmart, for instance, they were all really quick to adopt chip cards. The only problem is once you trickle down into the medium-sized merchants and the small businesses like the mom and pop shops, they don't really deal with that much fraud. So there wasn't a really strong incentive for them to update their terminals, pay thousands of dollars for these new payment equipment for a marginal gain. And what they said was that, you know what, screw it, we're not gonna update. We're just gonna deal with the minimal fraud that we have. And that's why in some stores you'll go and you'll be swiping, and then in another store you'll be inserting your card. And it's caused a lot of confusion. For instance, I was at a CVS recently where I had to swipe because for some reason the dipping mechanism wasn't working. And there's just all these sort of weird confusions on the consumer side that really just stem from the fact that this was really poorly planned rollout by the networks and the banks.
Yeah, and I felt since chip has been rolling out this like layer of I don't know, like you go through this song and dance, you try and do it, and then it beeps loud. It's almost like you're being shamed. You did the wrong thing, or you didn't put it in, far enough, or whatever. And it's like this. It's actually kind of a jolting experience in some places. You try and do it right, and it yells at you.
It's kind of weird. And I mean, I've been doing recently. I'm just asking like, hey, do I swipe or do I dip it? Which is like adding a couple more seconds to the process. And I mean, yeah, obviously it's not that difficult to make payments in the U.S., but every second counts if you're a retailer. The bigger the retailer you are, the more the longer checkout experience, the more frustrated your customers are going to be, and it's going to hurt your bottom line at the end of the day. So it actually during the holiday season, a lot of big retailers decided to shut off their EMV because they didn't want to add any checkout time because they wanted their customers to get in and out as fast as possible. So they actually shut it off and didn't worry about fraud because they understood that it was a really poor customer experience.
Because every single time you do this, if it tacks on even 3, 4, 5, 10 seconds, depending on how, especially during a holiday season, like that adds, that just aggregates quickly, and suddenly that could potentially mean a lot longer lines just because of this new technology. Now, what about chip readers in restaurants and bars? This is a kind of an aspect that I hadn't thought of before reading your piece, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, it's actually pretty funny. I was sitting in a bar one day right after the liability shift, and I was like, wait, none of the bars that I go to are actually dipping my card. They're still swiping it like normal. So I talked to a bunch of bar owners, and they said that what they told me was that if you add a chip card reader, it creates a complete logistical nightmare behind the scenes on how a bar normally operates. For some cases, the software wasn't ready to support the chip card and bar tabs, so that they would have to revert to tallying bar tabs with pen and paper. And if you're a New York City bar on a Friday night, you don't want to be, tallying the bar tabs with pen and paper. It would be too much of a nightmare. And then also the ordering process. Let's say you sit at a bar with your friends, and then you guys go to one of the tables and eat at a restaurant. You have to do two separate transactions, and it just causes kind of a logistical nightmare if you want to have chip readers at a bar. I spoke to dozens of bars, and not one of them updated their chip cards and most of them said that they wasn't even very high on their radar. It wasn't a big point of concern for them.
Well, that's where that's the craziest thing when you talk about credit cards versus like something like Apple Pay or something. We're handing over our credit card to bartenders or waiters. They're taking it into the back room. We don't see it. So, we're sort of used to at retail places not handing over our card anymore, just swiping it ourselves. But, I guess we're all, as a society, completely comfortable with handing over our cards and letting someone take it at restaurants and bars.
Because that's the choice we have, So other than, of course, bringing in cash, I suppose.
Cash?
Yeah. What is that?
I know, right? Well, actually, a lot of bars that I spoke to said that they were much more interested in adding Apple Pay and mobile wallets in their restaurants and bars. So there would be a little NFC receiver, spread out throughout the bar. And there are a bunch of really interesting small startups that are trying to solve a lot of the bar tab and the nightlife and restaurant management systems for EMV and chip card and readers. And a lot of them are focused on Las Vegas clubs Las Vegas clubs that are seeing a slight increase in fraud since the shift. Apparently, that's what they've told me. So they're trying to figure out how to deal with that without making it a complete nightmarish experience for the customer.
Yeah, I can imagine with the mobile payments, like I've thought about that. The only way that you do that in a bar or particularly in a restaurant where you're sitting at a table, like right now we're so used to sitting at a table, handing the card, the method of payment to the person, they walk away with it, but you don't necessarily do that with your phone. So it's almost like they have to have the technology, the infrastructure to be able to bring that to the table, and that's just part of what they do. So that actually takes a shift in kind of their approach and an upfront investment in the technology to do that. But that makes makes a lot more sense to me too. So are we just going to slog through this whole chip thing for the next couple of years before we finally get it right? Is there any sign of finally reaching that point that those in like the UK and other places that have been doing this for 10 plus years, like it's blissful there, why not here? When do we get bliss?
I don't think it'll take 10 years. I'll say that.
Okay.
I think it'll be about a year or two before things get before almost all merchants accept EMV cards. I think one of the saving graces of this whole thing is that all these EMV readers, these chip card readers that these merchants are updating to, they support Apple Pay and mobile wallets too. So if you have a phone that supports that, you have a really seamless checkout experience.
Sure.
And I think that's going to be a big this EMV shift could be this chip card shift could be a real big driver for mobile wallet usage in the States. You kind of see it happening with the UK already. The UK has had this entire chip infrastructure with NFC technology baked into the terminals, and now over the past year or so, contactless payments has been taking off there. So it's been really interesting to see how, because they had the groundwork laid out, NFC payments are really taking off. And a lot of people think that a similar kind of trend could happen in the US. So it's getting better slowly. It's probably going to be about another 6 months to a year before things are really, you're paying with your chip card, you're dipping your chip card everywhere, so there's no more confusion and things like that.
Yeah, six months to a year more of that reader burping at me when I do it wrong and making me feel like a jerk.
That's a little optimistic, but
All right.
yeah, that's what I'm hopeful for. Hopefully we'll
All right.
get it up by then.
All right, I'm hopeful too.